Hey guys, how you doing? I've been asked to do a video on expectations for grades and time periods and stuff like that for kind of like average people, like I guess the jiu-jitsu community calls them hobbyists, right? So, typically it's I guess typically it's a dad in his like late 30s, 40s, sometimes even 50s, and like they're not out to win the world championships, like they want to come along and get fit. It's an interesting way to stay fit and meet people, all the usual stuff. And the question from one of my subscribers was about time periods, like how long, like everybody hears about the special cases like BJ and stuff like that, guys who get their black belts in 3 to 5 years, things like that, and a lot depends on the school, a lot depends on the instructor, and how they grade. Some schools only grade based on competition performance, for example. I think a lot of the time that's kind of almost a cop-out for the instructor, because the coach doesn't want to be the one making the decision about the ability level of the student. And when they receive a gold medal externally, then that kind of validates what the coach's decision to promote them. In our academy, we've got a very strict curriculum, for example, so you have to know the whole curriculum. You don't have to be perfect at the whole thing. You have to know it well. You have to be able to use the positions and use the techniques when you're rolling. Because that's really what I want to see, is when I'm teaching a particular technique, then I would because we do positional training, rolling straight after. So we drill a little bit and then we'll roll a bit, but positionally. So what you've just done in class, so if we're working on a choke from guard for the last half an hour or so, then we're going to do between 15 and 30 minutes of positional rolling from the guard, and I would be expecting you to be trying to get that choke, finding out, getting data about how that choke works and how it doesn't work, the problems you're coming across, the person's posturing too well, they're intercepting your hands, and you keep rolling with different people every couple of minutes trying to accomplish the same goal, and then you're forming data, and then you can ask me hey coach, I've been trying to do this, but it's not working. I'll be like, well, what's the person doing to you? And then we start the problem solving process of working our way through the person's defenses to get to the neck to finish the choke, right? So that's kind of the process. I often liken it to, if I was a swimming coach, right? I try and simplify things as much as possible. I see that's my primary goal as a coach, is to try and make everything simple for people. So I often use swimming as an analogy. And I'm like, if we've just done a class on breaststroke, and then I give you free time to go swim in the pool and you go do freestyle, you're kind of wasting the lesson. This is the best time for you to do your freestyle, your breaststroke, because I've just been coaching you on it. Now you can self-analyze and think about the movements that you've been doing, that I've been describing, the pitfalls, the mistakes, the things you want to do well, the things you should focus on. This is the time when it's fresh in your brain to do those things, right? So, digressing slightly, but that's what you're really trying to do, is integrate into your rolling, but not free training, because then you're only going to come across that position maybe once or twice every 5 minutes. So positional rolling is awesome to integrate the technique into your repertoire, right? So when hobbyists join, so that's someone who's training once or twice a week, maybe 3 times a week, but they've got a lot going on. There's usually a family, they have a career, and this is just, instead of going to the gym, they do this, or sometimes they go to the gym as well, but they're not super serious about it, right? So I liken getting grades in jiu-jitsu to kind of joining a running club, right? So if you went to a running club and you said, hey, I'd like to become a runner, let's say a competitive runner, are they going to tell you to only run twice a week? Probably not. Minimum would kind of be 3 times a week to start with, right? And then you're going to build up your miles and stuff from there. But if you're coming along saying, I'm only going to train once or twice a week, but I want to be a competitive runner, they'd probably just tell you like, I think your expectations are a little bit skewed. So in jiu-jitsu, it's similar, is that yes, it generally takes 2 to 3 years to get your blue belt, for example. But if you're only training like once a week, sometimes twice, that you know, some people never get their blue belt. You know, like, you know, you have to train regularly and frequently enough that you can retain the information and take an interest in it. Like, you know, it's a couple of years. Generally, most people will get in 2 to 3 years, and that's great. You know, when you then turn around after that and start looking at purple belt, which is going to take, you know, if you're training 4 times a week diligently and you're training really well and you're consistent, your diet's good and your sleep's well and you're, you know, doing all the right things, it'll still take you like 3 years to get it, you know. And again, that's 5 years to purple, right? So if let's say you're a 25, 30-year-old guy and you're very motivated, you're physically fit and healthy and all those sorts of things, and you have the time and dedication to give to the art because like this is your thing. This is not just a thing. This is your sport. This is your art. This is the thing that you want to get really good at. You've been bitten by the bug. Then you're probably going to be the guy that gets his blue belt in 2 years, and you're probably going to be getting your purple belt in another 3 years. Yeah. So like you're on track to get your black belt in like, you know, 8, 9, 10 years, like most people. It took me 10 years to get mine. You know, I went from white to blue in a year, but I was training literally 6 or 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. I was a professional athlete beforehand, and I had a massive martial arts background, and I'd already done quite a bit of judo. So everything was in my favor. I was super dedicated. I didn't have to work. I was just training full time. I won 4 golds at the end of the year at the Nationals and was presented with my blue belt, right? Purple belt was like another 4.5 years, 5 years, something like that. So 97 to 98. So no, end of 97 got my blue belt. And then 2002, I think I got my purple belt. Yeah. So, you know, a good time period. And that's with like near full-time training. You know, there was a couple of years where I was doing a lot of security work and I was only training like once a day, but I was, you know, like me, normally I'd be training, you know, minimum twice a day, 5 days a week. But when I first got to Melbourne and I had to work a lot to get myself established, I was still only training like once a day. In the weekends, I'd maybe train a little bit more sometimes, but still super dedicated. And it still took like 4 or 5 years to get it. Because the standards were really high, you know. I was under Hoyle Gracie, and like the standards are high. You have to be performing at a high level if you want to be. Purple belt is the majority of black belt. Like the skills that you have, the techniques that you have, and the skills that you have are most of, when you receive your purple belt, that's most of what you need to take through to black belt. It's a really heavy belt. I always describe it as like white, blue, purple, brown, black. Like once you have your purple belt, brown and black are relatively easy to get. Most of the skill acquisition you already have, most of the resilience and tenacity that you've had to draw on through white belt and through blue belt, you have it because otherwise you would have quit already. And so like purple belt is a big belt. To me, it's probably the biggest belt out of all of them. I mean, yes, black belt has a lot of weight to it. There's a lot of prestige. But purple belt is really where the dividing line is between those who are going to go through to black belt and those who are not. And so most of your journey through blue belt is about your guard development. Yeah. Learning all the different types of guards, learning how to pass them, all these sorts of things. Most of your self-defense in our curriculum, your self-defense, you go through the same self-defense in each belt so that you maintain it, right? So there's like, let's say 15 or 20 self-defense techniques in the white to blue. It reappears in every belt after that. And then weapons start getting added to it later on. But it's basically the same self-defense curriculum to ensure that you're maintaining it, right? The other stuff, like the other like 50 odd, 60 odd techniques, for blue to purple, it's a lot of guard stuff. You've got 18 different sweeps, you know, and while you're learning to develop all these sweeps and develop your different types of guards, you're also, when you're passing, starting to see those and understand what people are trying to do. So it's a huge amount of development, and a lot of people quit at blue belt because for once the pressure is put on you. The coaches teach you new techniques, but you have to figure out how to integrate them into your game. The first thing I always tell every new blue belt, that the very first thing they have to do is all the techniques that you already know from white to blue, start pairing them all up, yeah? Even make a triple attack, right? So, for example, from white to blue with your guard, in terms of submissions, you'll have like a choke and an arm lock and a kimura. And you can make really nice combinations out of those, especially if you're using like hip bump sweeps and things like that. So a typical triple attack would be like kimura, hip bump sweep, and guillotine. Those three go really, really well together, you know, and the order that you attack them in doesn't matter too much. You're going to feed off one to the other. So then you start clustering these techniques together, right? And your goal is to be able to misdirect the person so that they don't know. Like if you want the guillotine, for example, and you really hunt the kimura a lot, then the person is always going to be sticking their head forwards. And so then you can go easily from the top hand that's there for the kimura, can easily fit around for the guillotine, and then you can get your guillotine. So how you integrate those two together, or three, like that's up to the individual student, right? You know, like you have to pair them up, but how you're going to do it, like you have to figure out how you're going to do that, yeah? Because everyone's bodies are a little different. How you set it up, the particular arm lock that you like, that transitions to like the omoplata or triangle, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of self-work that has to go on between blue and purple belt. The curriculum is there, the teacher is there to guide you, but ultimately, like I can't make you get better. I can show you the techniques, I can help you, I can give suggestions on how you can connect them together, but ultimately you have to do the work while you're rolling or while you're drilling, and you have to take some time to think about these things. I tell my students, like for me personally, I like writing things down. Video is really good. Most guys are very visual, so you know, like figuring out how you learn is really super important. Yeah, I said to all the students the other night, like, take the time to figure out how you learn. Yeah, and I've got a student of mine, and I suggested to him, go and write down everything that you know about jiu-jitsu and start writing down your combinations and things like that. And then a month later, I asked him, like, hey, have you written them down? And he goes, no. And I went, okay. And he apologized. I'm like, no, it's fine, because it means that it didn't resonate with you. Yeah. So I'm like, next I'd like you to video yourself rolling and then watch that later on and then analyze where you think there's mistakes making and things like that, opportunities to improve. And so he did that, and then he found that hugely beneficial. So, okay, so now we're starting to figure out how you learn best. You learn best by watching yourself rolling, and then you can see the mistakes that you're making, and then you can make the corrections when you're rolling. Yeah, right? So figuring out how you learn best, and then figuring out how you are going to integrate these various techniques together so that they suit your body type. And even then, when you're doing that, it depends on the opponent that you have. If you have someone who's particularly tall or particularly short and stocky, then the techniques and the order that you're going to chase them in might change. And so that's the exploration. And I mean, it's fun, right? You've got these different tools, and you're going to go out and you're going to try these different things, and you're going to go home and write about it in your diary, and you're going to go, well, I tried this with this guy and this didn't work. Well, that's the journey from blue to purple, is to figure all this out. Yeah. And the byproduct of that is efficiency, right? So even just with three things, like if you were a boxer and you had a jab and a right hand and a hook, you could make a whole bunch of combinations out of that, especially when it comes to combining footwork and bobbing and weaving. And like, you don't need a lot of tools. It's about how you put those tools together. So that's what I say to blue belts right off the bat. It's like, start doing this. Yeah, right? Before you start looking too much at the purple belt curriculum, take what you already know and start making combinations out of that. Yeah, and then you'll start to find efficiency. You'll start to create setups, right? You'll start doing moves, like you'll start a choke and you can feel the person pushing at you with their arms. You're selling them on the choke. When they're pushing, bam, then you go for the armbar and you have the armbar. That's purple belt. That's what you want. Setup leads to technique. And you see this in judo constantly. When you learn judo, they always teach you 2 throws together, a forwards throw and a backwards throw, or a left throw and a right throw, because the person's gonna resist and the efficiency comes in. The efficiency is created between 2 techniques, not just being really good at one. Yeah, because if I do the technique, he can stop it, right? The question is, how do I use his resistance to the technique to help me and to disadvantage him? Yeah, so from white to blue, you mostly focus on this armbar and this choke and this triangle. Yeah, and then the blue to purple journey is about taking those things and pursuing efficiency through combinations. So when it comes to Mr. Hobbyist, this might take a long time. If you're on the mat 4 times a week, yeah, versus someone who's on the mat twice a week, you're doing double the work. Yeah, and not just that, but frequency matters, right? So if you're consistently on the mat 4 times a week, like every couple of days, your body is energized with this jiu-jitsu vibe and the feeling of it and the movement, and you're gaining more and more and more data. So if you're going to train 4 times a week for like 3 years and aiming at your purple belt at the end of that, that's pretty realistic. But if you're training half that amount, you can basically double the amount of time that it's going to take for you to get to your purple, for example, you know? And so like, that's the big difference between the hobbyist who's primarily doing it because it's interesting and they're not like overly concerned with competition and things like that. It just has a place in their life. But then you get people who are kind of like me, right? And like, this is their life. They've found their thing, you know, and this is their thing, and they're deep into it. And the other people you almost have to hold back and restrain and say, man, like, you know, you don't need to train 5 or 6 days a week. Like 4 is great. Stick with that. Have you know, rest a little bit in between, maybe a bit of yoga, maybe a little bit of weight training just to balance things out, a little bit of cardio, you know, like you literally have to tell those people, hey, settle down a little bit. Like, I think you're doing a bit too much, you know. And so basically the more you can train, yeah, then the faster you're going to develop, and the less that you train, then it's just going to take longer. It doesn't mean that your journey is any less fun. It's no less special. It's no less interesting. Yeah. It's, you know, it's just in terms of like what you can achieve belt wise. Yeah. Given the lack of frequency on the mat, it just makes sense, right? So if you're a hobbyist, just focus. You hear this all the time. Focus on the journey, not the belt. Yeah. If you're the guy who's on the mat 3-4 times a week and like this is your thing, yeah, and you're like, right, I'm going to get this belt no matter what, then you're the person that's going to be very hard to stop. Yeah. Like, you're the person that doesn't really need to be motivated. In fact, they usually have to get told to settle down a little bit, you know, to train a little bit less. They start getting overuse injuries and things like that. You know, and if you're a hobbyist, that's awesome. You know, like, it is kind of obsessed by it as I am, and I have been for a very long time. I was saying to somebody the other day that literally, I understand the belt chasing thing. You know, it's an easy goal to look at. And you know, when I was going through the grades, then, you know, when I was a blue belt, I wanted to get my purple. When I was a purple, I wanted to get my brown and stuff like this. The great irony is that when you get your black belt, And Chris Houter did a really cool video the other day where he said, well, of course black belts are the ones that say that it's not about the belt because they've already got their belt, right? So we're afforded that luxury, but it's because we're trying to pass on the lessons that we've learned. We're trying to make it less painful for our students, you know? And when we see students who are struggling, who are just obsessed with getting a belt, and you can see that they're forcing techniques. They haven't spent the time really trying to integrate it into their game and really understand the movement. They're so desperate, like, to get this belt and to do the work that they're just forcing all the techniques, and it's just looking horrible, and it's just not working. And I ask those guys to just like relax, like just focus on consistency and enjoy your journey and be curious about adding these new techniques, like trying to force the technique on the person because like this technique's in my curriculum and I have to be able to do it. And I've only got like 6 months or a year, I've got to get all that tension and anxiety is feeding into your jiu-jitsu and it's ruining it. You have to do jiu-jitsu really well. You want to be relaxed, because then your body can move nicely, your brain is open and fresh, and you can watch. And it's always the people who are focusing on winning because they think that they have to like win their way to the next belt. They're the people that always end up quitting. They're the ones that always end up falling by the wayside because they're trying to force it. They're not listening to the coach, and the people who can, the biggest development, the biggest gain that you're going to get in jiu-jitsu is relaxing. Yeah. Then your body will move nicely. You'll feel when you're using excess tension. You'll feel the other person's body better. You'll make better decisions because you're relaxed. You're less likely to get injured because you're not tense and jerky and trying to do weird things with your body. Anyway, I've gone off track a little bit, but if you're a hobbyist, just be patient, like understand and make sure that your expectations are proportionate to reality. If you're only training a couple of times a week, then just make sure that your expectations manage that, and if there's a guy on the mat who's getting promoted because he's training twice as much as you, like your job is not to try and beat that guy. Yeah, your job is to like either rearrange your life and its priorities so that you can train more, or accept the place that you have for jiu-jitsu in your life and that there's other people on the mat who are single, who don't have a family, who have a job that allows them to train a lot, who are super dedicated, and that's their journey. And it doesn't mean that your journey is worthless. It doesn't mean that your journey, pales in significance or anything like that. It's not true. Like I went through a huge learning experience when I smashed my back up and couldn't walk properly. I couldn't walk at all, and like I couldn't even lift my feet off the floor. Like if I lay on the floor, I couldn't lift my heels. I had no guard. I couldn't use my legs. I could sort of curl into a little bit of a ball a bit, and going through that whole process taught me so much about humility. I was a really arrogant knob beforehand, and I was just wanting to win everything. I wanted to fight in the UFC, and yeah, it's just, like it was a huge learning experience for me going through that and seeing people getting very frustrated with their progress and belt chasing and things like that. It's difficult it's a difficult thing to be honest with students about what they're able to do, with the lifestyle that they have and the commitment that they have or don't have. And, sometimes they get injured and they get frustrated. And I'm like, dude, like, welcome to my world. Like, you have to just change your perception of things. I watch a lot of mountain biking. I was a professional mountain bike racer. I see races. I follow the World Cup all the time. The guys have a big crash. They were on track to win the overall world title and stuff. And then they have a crash and break their wrist and they miss 2 races and the chance is done, but they still have to push themselves hard to get to rehab their wrist, to get back on the bike, to make the sponsors happy, you know. And I think that it's just a mindset. And I was watching some videos this morning, and this Navy SEAL said, you kind of have it or you don't. Yeah, you kind of have resilience and the ability to not quit. You have grit or you don't. And I don't know. I don't know if I like to believe that. I think that you can draw out resilience and tenacity in people by challenging them, but, you know, not too much. You know, one of my coaches, for example, he'd never done any martial arts or anything before, and I've seen some enormous changes in him. You know, he's building more self-confidence. He's got more resilience. You know, blue belt gradings at my place are like Navy SEAL hell week. It's very, very, very difficult. And you would think that the resilience that it takes to work your way through that, those very difficult couple of hours and the years that led up to you getting your blue belt would put you on track for purple. But then the blue flu comes, and people realize that, like, the journey from blue to purple is a very, very difficult one, because you have to really figure yourself out. And it's not just being spoon-fed things by your coach anymore. It's not an easy path. I would say blue to purple is probably the most difficult out of all of them. But, you know, you do the work, you get the accolades, and then you're like, wow, that was difficult. But then once you get your purple, you have most of your attributes to go through to black. You know, you've got your resilience and tenacity. You've got your guard play. You've been past, and you've no doubt had an injury or a couple of injuries that you've had to heal from, and you've had to be humble and be patient during that period. And Chris Howder said it the other day. He goes, all the belts leading up to black belt are preparing you for black belt, for all the difficulties and challenges that are going to occur once you get that black belt, that all the other belts are just really practice for that. So if you're a hobbyist out there, just make sure that your expectations meet reality. And if you're one of those guys who's like really bitten by the bug and this is your thing, and you're deep in it, then that's awesome too. Just make sure that you're not pushing too hard. Make sure that you can rest and enjoy the rest of your life as well. Anyway, if you've got any questions or anything, you know how to contact me. Shout out in the comments. Let me know your thoughts and feelings. A lot of people find value in these videos, which is why I keep doing them. And yes, I have 2 green hoodies. They're my favorite. I always wear the same hoodie. Anyway, see you guys. Bye.